Does it cost the earth to keep your home warm? York Community Energy, a local non-profit organisation, is starting an insulation scheme in York to help York homeowners make their homes cheaper to heat while reducing their carbon footprint at the same time. High levels of insulation, alongside other retrofitting measures, result in less energy needed to keep your house at a comfortable temperature, which in turn saves on energy bills and cuts CO2 emissions. Both people and the planet benefit. The first step on this journey is to carry out a home energy review, an assessment to identify the best measures to take to upgrade your house. Andy Walker, a professional assessor and installer from Shore Insulation, is here to show us and members of York Community Energy how he assesses a house and to describe some of the measures he might recommend.
So, when we're starting a process of energy review, we need to look at every element of the house. We need to look at the walls, the floors, the doors, the ceiling and windows, every element. Because what we're looking for is weak points. We're looking for single points of failure. We're looking at the place where the greatest amount of heat is leaving the living space. One of the classic places is glasswork, either indoors or in windows. Now, this lovely space that we're standing in at the moment has this delightful entire ceiling skylight of glass panels. Now, I'm told that these were put in over 10 years ago, but that they were specified as being argon filled. This is a good thing, and I'm pulling a face slightly because this still gives us a U value of between 1.3 and 1.6. Now, if we take a thermometer here, this is an infrared temperature reading. Now, the floor, which has got underfloor heating, is showing me a very commendable 20 degrees. The wall, as we follow the dot up here, 18, and so that's really quite acceptable. But once I turn around and look at the side of the door, we're dropped to 15, and as we come up to the edges of the windows, we're down to 13. So this is telling me straight away that we've got this temperature gradient through the room with a very cold surface of some 8 or 9 square meters at a guess, where there's a lot of heat being lost. So whereas it's a wonderful light space, it's also thermally quite tricky. So for me, the thing that I'd be looking to do here would be to have blinds that we could pull across the space. And in the coldest of days, maybe I would choose to partly cover this skylight and focus on one element of the room. And then at night, of course, we can pull the blind right the way across, because at that point we don't need the light. The kinds of blind material that we could use often would be chosen to do two things. One would be to reflect the heat back, so on the hottest of days we're taking some of the heat out of the room. But the key reason that it's working, it's doing something useful for us, is that it's stopping warm air in the living space circulating against the cold surface, which then will descend again and makes the room feel colder. The other thing that happens is, because it's a cooler surface, 13 degrees, then body heat will radiate, infrared body heat will radiate towards the cooler surface, and that's one of the key reasons that makes humans feel cold. So by warming up the surface, by having even a thin barrier between the two, would make a perceptible difference within this room. So on this surface, I would recommend curtains, again, that could be pulled across in the darker parts of the day. And it's a less of a problem because it's not at the top of the room. So it could be that you could fit a temporary curtain pole and only use it during the cooler months. And in the spring and summer and autumn, you could take the pole down altogether to leave the view out onto this nice patio space. So we've moved now into the hallway, and this is one of the outside doors in the property. The stairs are coming up here. And what I'm immediately noticing is that the air temperature is a lot cooler in here. And in looking around, there's some really obvious reasons why this is. This door has been replaced at some point in the not so recent past, but unfortunately the specification of the door is really quite poor. These panels in particular are very thin, and the section in the double glazed units is also quite thin. The light above the door is only single glazed. I can feel a draft coming around the edges. So here's one of the major problems in the house. If I use the temperature gun again, we can look at it's very cool. Even the floor here is 12, but as I move around the door frame, I've got an 11 here. Nothing higher than a 13, and in particular these sections here are so thin, we're looking at 11 degrees. If I move up to the edge here, and 9. So that's quite cool. And I can feel a very substantial draft here, whistling all the way from the North York moors. One of my early recommendations in the house would be to replace this door. Certainly the skylight above the door as well could be upgraded. Another thing one of the things that you can get with door frames like this is to get a complete door set, and it will be possible to have the door set fitted and have the junction between the door frame and the walls to be airtight and insulated, but with a flexible material so that any movement in the house would be taken up by the mastic kind of silicone filler around the edge. I always recommend to customers to think of security in particular on the ground floor. So for me, I'd be looking at least a secured by design door here. The next part of the space that we're looking at here, which is a challenge, is the whole area of the outside wall. These are really very difficult to treat, and unless we're stripping right the way back to the brickwork and putting a thin layer of high specification insulation on the wall, then we're not going to be able to make much difference. One of the easy ways of fixing this would be to have a curtain across this outside door, which in fact would be the first thing that I'd want to do within the next few days. But then also to treat this space in particular as more of a corridor. It's not a living space, it's not somewhere where we'd come and sit and read or have a conversation. So to be able to close the doors leading onto it and turn the heat down, turn the radiators down in this room, would be a really, really clever way of reducing energy loss simply by having running it as a cooler space. One of the ways to make that more possible is to fit automatic closing devices on each of the doors. Now you can either get these with the elbow arm with a box, they're only about £15, or you can get some that fit into the door themselves with a chain and a spring. They're only a few pounds and take an hour or so to fit. One of the elements of this space which often gets forgotten is the space below the stairs and the panelling here going down into the cellar stairs, or the under cupboard space. This is unheated and it's a huge source of heat loss. Part of the process of doing an energy review in a house is identifying the boundaries between heated space and unheated space. It's not always where you think it's going to be, and then choosing an appropriate treatment that will reduce the heat flow. So we've been looking around the house and we've found some very interesting aspects to this beautiful property. In the conversations that we've been having with the homeowner, we've identified some really good opportunities for reducing the amount of cold air blowing into the house and stopping some of the heat escaping through the surfaces, particularly the windows, the doors, and in some cases the walls. Looking around the rest of the house, what I notice is that the radiators could be improved by having better radiator foil behind them. Certainly the lighting is pretty good in the whole house, but one of the things that I'd want to do is just to double check that we've really got the lowest energy bulbs in all of these areas. In the Western world, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we've become addicted to fossil fuel, and this means that we have an expectation of burning a lot of energy, both for transport and for our homes and also in our appliances. Now, for us to respond appropriately to the climate emergency, we've got to find ways to dramatically reduce those. It's the latest government statistics says that 11% of households in Britain are living in fuel poverty, which means that they can't properly afford to live in warm homes, which I think is criminal. So we need to understand the scale of the problem. In Britain today, there are about 28 million homes. 4 out of 5 of those are going to still be standing and in use in about 50 or 60 years' time. So these are the houses that we've got to fix if we're going to tackle this huge carbon emissions problem from domestic properties. That's a very large number, but one of the really great things about tackling the carbon emissions would be that we'd create hundreds of thousands of jobs. We'd stimulate the UK manufacturing industry for the insulation that we need. Would certainly stimulate the local supply chain of delivering it to the housing projects. We'd be improving the health and well-being of tens of millions of people. We'd reduce the burden on the NHS, particularly for respiratory illnesses. We'd improve something called community cohesion, which is the process whereby if you put some money into a neighbourhood, then everybody works together to improve the quality of life there. If people aren't spending money on bills, they'd be putting more money back into the local economy. We'd be reducing carbon emissions. And also, we'd be improving the UK's fuel security. And given the amount of energy that we import, particularly gas, this has got to be a good thing for the nation. Part of the solution is going to be retrofitting our homes to a high standard of thermal efficiency. The mandate and the money for that is going to take a while to come down from central government and out through second tier government. What's already happening, and I'm really excited to see this, is that in many cities there are local community groups who are taking on the challenge of retrofitting homes prior to this engagement at the larger scale. The first thing that happens with any kind of insulation scheme is to make a review of the houses that are going to be worked on. The kind of skills that are needed to do that involve understanding about construction styles, building physics in terms of heat flow and moisture transport, and then also about the range of interventions that are possible in terms of draft proofing and air tightness, and then insulation systems. So tonight we're in a house here in York, and we're looking at various aspects of the work that's already been done in this house. In the process of a review, we're looking for the quick wins, and also we're looking for the larger projects which will cost more money but will give more benefits in the long run. The process of conducting an energy review is part tutorial and part building assessment, and I'm convinced that the better way to create the body of knowledge within the community is to work with the customers and help them make informed choices about their own homes. The processes of heat flow and cold air ingress into a house are actually relatively simple. But the challenge is finding the actual boundary of between living space and unheated space, and then choosing appropriate measures to make the kind of difference that we need to pursue. Each house is going to be different. Each house has had different work done to it, and with a different pattern of usage, even identical houses would need a different pattern of work to be done there. One of the things that I'm convinced is very possible, particularly in the community context, is to encourage people to do it for themselves, or to do it with amongst groups of friends. This would mean that the skills can be shared, and we're not relying on professional or tradespeople to do the work.
Well, that's a start, but of course every home is different, and we've only been able to look at some of the things that could be done. There are many other things to consider, such as floor and wall insulation. We can bring our infrared camera to show you where you're losing most heat. You could even host a housewarming party and do some or all of the work yourself, with the help of Andy Walker and York Community Energy supporters. These parties are a great way to learn from an expert the skills needed to improve your home, to share the experience with like-minded people, and to reduce installation costs. In certain circumstances, there may be grants to help keep the cold out. If you'd like to know more and find out what could be done to make your home a cosier home, the next thing to do is to get in touch with us at York Community Energy for a chat. You can email us at the address on the screen or contact us via social media. York Community Energy is on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. It won't cost you anything while it's literally costing the earth to keep our homes warm. UK households account for around a third of the country's energy use and related carbon emissions. Let's see what we can do together to help the planet and get those heating bills under control.